So I'm going to share an excerpt from a book that I'm reading. This is a book from one of my professors with One for Israel, Dr. Seth Postel. I have always enjoyed taking classes with him, and I was excited when he released this book, The Art of Narrative Analogy. And if you've taken classes with Dr. Postel, you already know that he's a Star Wars fan, and he talks so much about how reading the Bible the way that you would watch a movie is beneficial to you. So you don't walk into a movie theater halfway through and then think that you can interpret the ending. You might see the ending, but to really understand it all come together, you go back to the beginning. So in the book, he's saying that when he was I don't know how old he was, but it was 1981, and he watched C.S. Lewis's The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And when he watched it, he was appalled at the fact that the witch had plunged her knife into Aslan. And he says, like Susan and Lucy, I thought that, Aslan was done for. But then all of a sudden, the stone tablet cracks and he arises in his lion glory. He says now, and I'm going to read this, why was I so surprised to see the risen Aslan? Because I grew up in a Jewish family where the New Testament was a forbidden book. I knew absolutely nothing about the story of the New Testament and Jesus. Only years later did I realize that Aslan's story was an analogy to the story of Jesus in the Gospels. Understand that many, many Jewish people who grew up in Jewish households, they grew up in the traditions, some of them, right? If they practiced the traditions, they grew up practicing the traditions. In other words, they would worship God with their lips, but their hearts were far from him. It was almost like in Ezekiel when you can see the bones come alive and the sinews come on, but that's it. The spirit still needs to be breathed into them. And that hasn't happened yet. But I'm actually living in a time where I see that happening. A time when this professor, who once was not a follower of Jesus and knew nothing about him, reads the New Testament and realized, oh, this is the ending of the story. I've only had the first, but now I have the ending. I have the start, the middle, and the ending, and it all points to Jesus, the Messiah. And that's why it's so exciting that I talk so much about the Jewish people whose eyes are being opened, the veil is being lifted, because of stories like my professor, who went from being someone who worshiped and their heart was far from him to now their hearts being completely sold out for Jesus.